All right, everyone. Now we have a rather chilling story. Link in the description. Not archived, of course. This is just a tweet. According to Tulsi Gabbard, who I generally trust, Intel chief, of course, unfortunately, over 100 known terrorists, so these are people that are on the radar, entered the country, but only 8 of them were detained or deported, which means you've got, possibly 100 or so terrorists running around in the United States that are hostile to our interests. This makes me very happy, by the way. Makes me sleep more soundly at night. The problem is the second that these people begin to understand the usefulness of incendiary devices, which so far, thankfully, they haven't really figured out, all hell breaks loose. Can you imagine the damage that a single person can do in a small town with a crate full of Molotov cocktails? And yeah, it wouldn't be pretty now, would it? We saw this during the George Floyd riots, actually, during the Summer of Love. You remember that one surreal scene? It was actually being reported on by uh, one of those left-wing networks, Vice, which is no longer useful at the time. And I was watching that live as that car lot was burning slowly. And because there was so much chaos, of course, they didn't put the fire out and probably destroyed $1 million worth of cars. That was one person that did that, by the way. And they didn't need an excessive number of incendiary devices. Imagine if they had had a little box with them. Um, you, this is rather concerning because it never should have happened. The fact that the prior administration, the Biden administration, did not man the border, made absolutely no effort, particularly to detain anyone. Again, 8 out of 100, or more than 100. How? Well, what a wonderful win ratio you've got. Um, the fact that they made no attempt to shore up the border, to man the border, etc., has put our nation in jeopardy. Any one of these people they could fucking get a dirty bomb. They could create explosives. They could create incendiary devices. They could just go crazy in a crowded area with a machete or something like that. Go on a suicide bombing run. It's entirely possible. In fact, it's not even unlikely, unfortunately, that something like that will occur. Now, some of these people might have been on the radar and they're not actually terrorists at all. So we'll give them that. Let's say it's 50-50 though. Okay, so there are 50 known terrorists that have disappeared into the woodwork in the United States, mostly Islamic terrorists. How lovely. Why am I not surprised? Are you smoking crack? Don't bother answering the question. You must have gotten it from Hunter instead of Sleazy, or else you'd be a little bit more clear-minded. Um, this is not the way in which the U.S. government is supposed to function. It's not the way that the border is supposed to function. No sane, meaningful nation would hazard itself in such a way. That group of people, if they, let's say they organize together, let's say you get a dozen terrorists organizing, and they start a little bit of a lab probably with Saudi money, by the way, and they decide to start manufacturing bombs. And then they're like, oh shit, we can wipe out several city blocks with this one. And then they put it in the back of a Ryder van or something like that. And you get another okay city sort of situation on steroids. It'll be blamed on the Trump administration, oddly enough. I guarantee that it would, because Orange Man bad. But it would be the result of the failed border policies of Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris, the border czar at the time, as she gladly claimed the mantle of until it was clear that the border was a goddamn mess. And then all of a sudden, the title wasn't really official. There's no such thing as a border czar. Did you notice that? Oh my God, it was hysterical at the time. I mean, it's not funny what's happening at the border, but at least the legacy media headlines were funny. Trying to cover ass for her. It's a big goal, that's for sure. Gabbard coming out and saying, "Hey, there might be like 100 terrorists in this country, and those are only the ones that we know crossed, by the way. The ones that get processed and then released. Well, think about how many didn't get processed at all because they never got detained in the first place. So maybe it's 400. Maybe it's 500. Hell, maybe it's half of Al Qaeda. We have no goddamn idea. The country was effectively, in the border sense at least, derelict for 4 entire years. There was no attempt to shore up the border. Now, Trump, meanwhile, he sent the goddamn U.S. Marines down there, so nobody's crossing in those zones, is trying to get the funding together to create the rest of the wall and install the electronic monitoring systems and all the other, fancy smancy shit there, run drones and so forth, which brings up privacy concerns, admittedly, although it's pragmatic. Um, he's actually trying to do something. The Biden administration ignored the issue. For 3 years, they pretended there was none. Then finally, belatedly, Biden said, well, yeah, maybe the border's a mess. We should probably do something about that. Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. But for the last 3 years, you did absolutely nothing. You let in any Johnny come lately and temporarily detained them and then released them with an Obama phone. Um, that's not exactly helpful because you don't necessarily know where they're from. This dude calls himself Abdul. I'm sure he's from Haiti. Uh, in other words, you really, really screwed up the goddamn U.S. border. There's a reason why the liberal legacy media does not want to talk about Joe Biden right now. This is one of a number of them. One of nine. The border crisis, foreign diplomacy in Ukraine, Israel, etc. Crime levels, taxes, inflation. Name something that Biden managed to actually win on. There's a reason they forced him to drop out. It wasn't just because of his disastrous debate performance, by the way. It was much, much more than that. They were fomenting that possibility long before that debate even happened. The border is a mess. And now we've got, possibly hundreds of terrorists roaming around in the United States, possibly indoctrinating, by the way, other people. How lovely. Yeah, that's great. ISIS is in the United States right now, probably, and they don't know where the fuck they are. There's no way to know. And then we've got cities and states that are sanctuaries for these people, and they don't know who's who either. That's rather funny. By the way, my home state of Vermont is unfortunately one of them. Yes, indeed. That's about all. Peace out.